Welcome to another exciting edition of Utopia News, World of Legends. We're going to talk about the age breakdown in terms of races, what everyone decided to choose, at least what the survey represented, approximately around the time that the game had started and we started ticking down to the end of protection. So I'm joined here tonight with Smiles and Persian Cat, and we're just going to go over the breakdown a little bit. Welcome, Smiles. Welcome, Persian Cat. We've got
Hello
Welcome.
there, Wind.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us tonight. We've got Smiles' little notepad here on the screen just for illustration purposes and to help keep track of all the things that we talk about. So, Smiles, you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, I wanted to have this meeting just to chat about what we actually see people pick, what we were surprised by, what we're surprised that we don't see, and then also I plan to give a little breakdown on at least each of the top core there.
Awesome. Should be a good discussion. I think this is part of one of the most important part of the ages, at least for Kingdom setup. The very beginning, of course, where everybody chooses what they want to play. And with so few players still left in the game, it really is really important for those kingdoms that want to be the best.
Yeah, and we'll get to see different opinions on how we'd play everything and what we can expect to see from the age. So that'll be a good time.
It should be excellent.
So, big boy up top, pure orc. Surprised anyone?
So I'm not that much surprised because when I compare, for example, pure orc to pure avian or pure dryad, I see the only really hard hitter that doesn't have some kind of counter mixed in. So to me, pure orc seems like the standard. You want an attacker, you want something that hits hard, you want something that's versatile, you got orc.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
really liked Orc.
absolutely.
Orc was just one of
So you've
those
got
ones.
Bloodlust, one of the best spells in the game. Every age, you figure out what race has Bloodlust and figure out is it the best or not. And a lot of ages in the last 5 have been one straight up doing that. So you look at Orc, you've got a 18-point mounted elite with Bloodlust becomes what, a 20-point-ish?
Right around there.
And you've got 44% gains. And now Persian, you probably know this better than I do. That is only applying to trads, right?
No, that is all types of hits. That is one
And
of the great things about gain science, and one of the reasons why I tell my kingdom every age to max gains, because that increases your plunder, that increases your learns, and that increases your massacre damage.
so I was talking to Saps a few hours ago, and recently he land crowned with his orc sages. He had something like 160% gains. He was telling me
Yep.
pretty adamantly, no bonus to gain massacre, no bonus to raise in war.
It's no bonus to raise, it is a bonus to massacre. I've, at least as of like age, I think it was the 81 to 83, unless there's been a change since then, it actually did change it did affect massacre.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, no TM is safe against your orcs. So you've got, what's that? Massacre, trad, learns, not raise. Also, I believe it's not for conquest as well. I think that
Correct.
surprised people once upon a time.
Correct, because conquest is considered a failed attack. You don't actually get your gains.
All right, they've got their ambush protection. And that is land only. So if you want to kill some orc elites, that's still an option for you. And having the 2 -1s on defense, orcs got one of the easier ambushes in the game, other than any sort of pure avian, pure orc, or a mix of those two with undead. So one of those few weaknesses that they do have, somewhat covered up by that land loss. Even then, if you're ambushing an orc with 44% gains, I think he's still going to take enough.
Yes. Generally, my experience is if you are ambushing something, it needs to have less than 25% protection for you to really start affecting that race. The only time you want to ambush and they have less than that is literally just when you're trying to kill their military by doing ambushes.
Also got your increased enemy kills. That's stacking 3 ways, orc twice, and your bloodlust, getting about a third increased kills. Now, increased kills scale directly with offense. So as one of your top offense picks, that's scaling very well. If you have 33% more offense than someone, you're killing 33% more guys anyways. So it's really nice to have that sort of bonus stacked on something that's already high offense. Now, what are the drawbacks you see to orc? Because there certainly exists some.
Yeah, so when you actually use Bloodlust, you end up with 20% more damage. So Bloodlust ends up being relatively situational in that you literally can't do it every hit per war, or you're going to start burning your Providence out.
What's that spell called? Wrathful. Good. So you be hitting an enemy orc, you're taking about 50% extra gains if they got a happy dryad in the kingdom. So something to look out for as well. Mm-hmm. Now, they're taking extra losses. Now, the biggest downside to orc that I see is a lack of free build space. Usually when I'm comparing races, I translate their bonuses directly into percentage land. And from orc, you have nothing that gives you extra land. So you're slow, you're taking extra losses, you need your stables, you don't have any particular defense, and you're gaining a lot of land at a time. You could, I think with 4 gens, come pretty close to doubling in size in a lot of opening war waves. So,
oh, easily with my combination of just half an orc, you know, an avian speed in Genesis, I was able to double in size, you know, almost every wave. Well, not double in size, but I was gaining about 800 to 900 acres between 4 attacks. So I mean, you know, you're really taking on the acres, and I was casting Bloodlust every time. To be honest, I didn't even really notice the extra troops being lost. You know, I was just getting that many credits, and I didn't really have money problems because I was backfilling with peasants so quickly that you know, with Love and Peace casts and the birth rate increase, um, you know, my income was just crazy. After 2 hours, I was at like 500,000 gold coins per tick, basically. So it was a monster in Genesis.
so yeah, I believe it. So orc's going to be either going full rainbow on their builds or they're going to be cutting something. What do you think I think most core only really manage 3 or so buildings at a high percentage. What do you think orcs are going to be cutting most? And what do you think orcs should be doing?
Personally, if I was an orc, I would build based on my size in the kingdom. So if I am large, I'm building watchtowers and guard stations, sacrificing everything else. If you're mid-size, you're building watchtowers and hospitals. And if you're small, you have maxed out those watchtowers and usually added some racks.
That's similar to how I do it. Often when I have a larger core, and I think this is going to be true for orc this age, I will inflate their D-specs quite a bit, and I'll actually run forts over GS, just making it harder to get those initial hits in. Once they start falling, they fall hard. There's not much to do about it, but I find it dissuades people quite a bit more. And at the bottom, I usually go, you can get your watchtowers and GS in later. Just go high hospitals for that sustain and growing your offense, high TGs. And in the middle, I sort of float in that GS. So I think an orc this age running 10, 11, 12 D specs per acre, if they're in the top third of land, they're going to be looking nice because you're, again, hitting in 150% losses. If you're hitting into that, they're not going to fall quickly. So
Correct. The only time you're going to start worrying about that is if you go into a setup that is nightmaring you, because Orc has 0 protection against Nightmare compared to basically everyone else.
yeah, that's true.
Orc's not going to be leaving any elites home, which is Nightmare at a third of the rate. So, I mean, Orc drops to that. Now, when we look at Dark Elves, there are not that many Dark Elves in the game. There's only 91, so that's going to be a rare encounter. But if you happen to go up against a kingdom with 5 or 6 of them, you better be maxing those guard stations hard.
And something looking at as a purebred, they got Town Watch. That means, in my mind, Town Watch is helping you most commonly just when you don't have the defense to stop quad taps and you're going to go down hard. You probably have inflated net worth with your elites out, meaning they can take you quite deep. And it's something that'll just save you that few thousand peasants at the end. And it's most noticeable the deeper you go. So if you know you're a primary target, it's going to matter a lot more than if you're just sort of a trimmy chain in the middle or mid-war. Without the birth rate bonus, it's an interesting dynamic. You have a lot of hybrids that are going to be inflated on peasants as the war goes on, presumably with that birth rate bonus, and they're the ones without Town Watch, so they're setting themselves up in a way. And yeah, 44% gains, 33% enemy kills, really high offense. It's certainly going to start strong. I just worry that they're going to quickly get hollowed out. If you gain double your land, that's half your TPA gone. That's half your buildings gone as soon as your land comes in. So you're either hoping to not overgain or have too many targets for them to take. If you've got 15 orcs, well, you know, that might be a problem, but they can only deal with so many threats at a time. And heck, you can always massacre. Nothing's stopping you.
According to the
Yeah, one of the nice things with Massacre is to actually plus hour your Massacre and then hit for a couple times in land. Since you are Orc, there's a good chance you might have just enough offense to be able to hit a smaller Thief Mage and actually get some land coming in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan of those +1 massacres. They add up. I think a problem Orc's going to have is because they swing up and down and land so much, they won't be able to consistently pump WPA. If you run something like in recent ages, you run a bit more of a tanky cleric, you can pretty reliably have them top third of land war after war, and then you end up with a decently high WPA cleric. My recommendation for all you orcs out there is if you end a war small, go all in on your universities and your EPA. If you end a war big, go all in on those guilds. Use that size. Overall, I think a lot of people expected this. I don't know if there's been a base 44% gains in the game for anyone, at least any time recently. So
yeah, but FFW Saps is saying he's baffled by so many orcs and dryads in the game. And what else does he say here? Orcs combined with avian could do it, but you run into massive issues of lack of stables. So 16-5 elite's kind of awful compared to other potentials, because Orc would have a 15-5 +3 from horses. I guess
yeah, with Bloodlust, it comes out to about a 20, and that's pretty much only getting beaten by another hybrid orc or a pure dryad.
Yeah, and he says you'll struggle with getting a lot of wars, and so why Orc struggle in getting wars is because of the nature of Orc. Double gains means that you will likely wave your opponent out of range. I mean, that's totally possible, which means you rely on either sending a dragon for the button or getting the button from somebody. I mean, when you're waiting for the button from somebody, that pretty much means you better be relaxing, better keep those universities or guilds pumping.
Or you learn wave with 0 incoming. That's going to be a very common thing for Orc is to just say, okay, this kingdom is about as strong as us, but since we're waving, we're going to have to wave with 0 incoming, lose 2 or 3 people on that opening wave, and then go from there. And so
And
it's
learning, waving without incoming is not the end of the world, because if they do want to capitalize on your core, that means your TMs are surviving that first wave. I think it's a bit of a blessing in disguise, having those targets for the enemy. Because often I'd rather lose a top core than risk TM hits. So use it
Yeah,
as bait.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the life cycle of a core is basically to go up and down unless they can make it to a cow and become unbreakable. But heck, it is really easy to just pump your TMs once they stay at the top if they're lucky enough not to take those hits. Or if someone doesn't go crazy and, as soon as war is declared, they just open up with massacres or something on your TMs and literally have zero incoming. Now, if their army's fast enough, they might still be able to hit for land before their enemy gets back.
Yeah, and waving orcs is going to hurt if they got those spells up or they know it's coming. It's a
Oh,
lot of losses
absolutely.
you're incurring.
Absolutely. Orc is not going to be a fun one to attack. I would recommend going at them with undead.
Yeah, that's one way to swing it.
Or
Surprised we didn't
undead.
see a few more undead orc, but I guess people like their science these days, and that is understandable.
Yeah, and you know what? That was a good combination too. Like undead orc, I think person pointed that out. Definitely, as I said, avian orc was a good combo because their penalties basically are negligible when you look at them both side by side. It's like you almost can't believe you're getting such a good province for zero penalties. It felt like.
Oh, and Mikey would hate me if I didn't mention your honor. Now, this last age, there was one Viscount orc on the server. As much as he claims if he was running them, he'd have all Viscounts or above. Not every kingdom is screw up, so maybe a penalty for him. But if you look at, say, only Baron Science, an orc is losing about 2% pop, 3% offense, 3% income, 5% TPA, WPA. It's not a lot, but little bonuses do work up. On the other hand, it'll allow people easier intros if they don't have to care about honor on their orcs and they want to stay in the war tier or they want to inflate WPA and EPA. It's an option.
Yeah, and honestly, I looked at that honor thing and then kind of thought, well, it doesn't really matter. Like that's not really what it's about with that kind of character or that kind of role, rather. I mean, I see Orc as kind of like a killer. That's all it really needs to do: kill and grow, and just keep killing and growing.
All right. Our next most popular pick with 145 picks to the pure orc 180 is a dryad dwarf. Now, is it just because everyone needs dryads and you're going to see 30-20% of the server picking the cleric? Or do you think there's a lot more going on here?
I think definitely, a lot of people were talking about support spells. Like when we first released those proposed changes, everyone was like freaking out that there was no support spells anymore. So I think there was a lot of emphasis on being able to cast the support spells, but also Dryad has such a nice elite. I mean, not to mention its income. I mean, talk about the perfect province to cow with. And like Dryad Dwarf. I mean, come on, like it basically plays itself.
Yeah, so from my perspective, when you're looking at the support spells, there's 500 people that went some form of Dryad. With right around 100 kingdoms, that puts a few kingdoms going heavy Dryad, but 145 being Dryad Dwarf, that seems to be a decent mix for the sportcaster. If you say the top 40 kingdoms mixed in three per kingdom, let's say, that puts you right about where that dryad dwarf would be. So it seems like the standard support caster to me.
You know what?
And
And
given that you want fanaticism and um, you want greater protection, heck, you even want minor protection being cast on your fairy when that fairy is fireballing. Seems like a good choice to mix in.
And I mean, dry just makes sense, especially like I'm sure people are when they pick their provinces and kingdoms, they're scared of the orcs, they're scared of the undeads, they're scared of the dryads, and all those support spells are perfect for that. It also helps against TMs as well. It doesn't really stop, like most of the spells don't necessarily stop them from getting through, but they reduce the damage. So I mean that's really helpful when you're getting opt nonstop.
And given that support spells is 100% guild based, not WPA based, the minus raise arson is a very nice little bonus.
Hey, you know what? How many people chose Dryad Fairy?
Certainly a few. I think I saw about 40, but you may have to
Right,
double
fairy
check
is
that.
16, fairy dryad is 22, so there's about 40 people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking at that right now. I got a Excel spreadsheet of the current survey. Yeah, that's definitely a good combo for a support caster, I would say, and that's one of those ones that you can keep. I guess they're going to have to train some form of defense. They can convert for elites that are pretty good, but they're pretty kind of in the middle. They can attack. That's a pretty good cleric, actually. Like that kind of makes me think of like an elf cleric almost. It's got a
To
Yeah,
be
you don't
fair,
have those
too,
minus losses though. You can't get yourself confused. I'm always thinking
yeah,
sportcaster means sustain, and it's just not true
yeah.
anymore. Only
No.
sustain left in the game is those undead.
Yeah.
And of
yeah.
course, the massive amount of credits we'll all be getting.
Yes.
And to be fair,
Especially
you added the con as no sync. If you're willing to sacrifice build space, you actually can keep sync on a dryad dwarf. You end up
Yeah,
having
only
to
if the
run
rest of your
quite a bit
core
of,
isn't running racks, though.
even if
Right.
your core is running racks, you just are going to end up massively in running your racks on your kingdom. You'll end up being at like 30% racks to keep up to the
Yeah,
kingdom running 5 to
I don't think
10%. That's
anyone
going to
that isn't
be
Atlas is going to be doing that, though. They're the only people I ever see with 30% of any building on any core.
I don't know, 30% guard stations and watchtowers are pretty standard from what I've seen. But
Yeah, you just hit the TMs of those kingdoms. That's easy. I've beaten Ascension a few times doing that. That's
yeah,
their forte is GS and watchtowers. When I
yep,
see a
we
core that's going all in on defense and turtle instead of offense, I just target something else. The way to win
yeah,
war is to eliminate threats, right? So if they're not threatening, you can ignore them to an extent.
you can still take them out. Guard station, I faced Ascension twice this fast stage, and guard stations don't mean much when your whole kingdom is quad tapping.
You
Yeah,
can
oh
lead
yeah.
with raises, but with your dwarf hybrid there, it's a lot harder to raise those guard stations away. It's a lot harder to get their BE
Yep,
down, so they're going to have pretty high effect.
yep,
I think a few, and you got missed in there. I think a few people are going to be really disappointed with their chains when they end up at 1,200 acres instead of 600.
yep. And me and Mystic Vortex is going to be very, very important to
Yeah.
start going after these dryads.
So, thing with these sorts of defensive spells, your cleric list, also your mist, your CS, your reflect magic, it doesn't usually stop runs of things. If they're going to fireball you 10 times, they're going to be happy to vortex you once or twice. If they're going to night strike you 50 times, they're going to be happy to vortex you once or twice. They're going to chain you, unless you're online, they're going to be happy to vortex you. Now, being chained is a bit more predictable than those other two. However, what Clear Sight and Reflect Magic are very strong at is countering those defensive spells or those duration spells, your Greeds, your Chastities, your Sloth, your Meteor Showers, and also your Petty Theft and your, that's how I call all robs in war, is just petty theft. It's something with low thieves that you can do if you got nothing else to do. And your riots are all going to be just a massive pain.
Yeah, as I said, those
Yep.
defensive spells from cleric are really, really amazing.
So That's a lot of self spells for someone that's supposed to be a support caster. Some of them last longer than others. Would you suggest 15, 20 guilds on those people, or are they gonna just do those self spells only when absolutely needed?
Well, personally, any war I go into as a Dryad Dwarf, I'd be running 25% guilds to start because I want to have max cast durations even after I get my first
Get a
wave of
land
land
in.
in. So
Interesting. I
this
don't
will
think I
be
would go as hard as that because you're really missing out on that BE bonus with the courtier land in that. But I would probably be going at about 15%, I think, myself.
Yeah, I would always run a cleric at 15 to 20% guilds. That's like the average range I stick to.
Yeah, you only need it for self spells.
well and casting on other
It's
people.
generally I found that our clerics always pumped to the top. They were left alone or they were able to turtle at home, and it really made a difference once they got up to the top because they were still pumping their WPA all the way up, and they always ended the war as our biggest provinces.
Yeah,
Even
I think that's
yeah,
it's not going to happen as much. I think a big part of that is how well their defense stays and how their lesser offense makes them less of a target. But
It's also going to be how they dragon slay as someone who almost always runs the sportcaster in my kingdom. I am the first one to suicide in with my dragon slay because I want to be hit down so my spells cost less. And if you don't hit me down and I grow up to be huge, hey, look, I can massacre. But
oh
if
yeah,
you hit me down again, hey, look, those 200 building credits I had, that's half my land now. Boom, my guilds are back and I'm cheap sportcaster again. So
yeah, I've loved my large elf clerics. That gnome age, I did it with gnomes, but the next two ages after that, I was running big elf clerics, and they would reliably get to marquee or count. They run in at like 12 specs per acre. They become unbreakable, and then if there is a dragon, hell, they can send like a third, a quarter, half their defense at the dragon, and they're still not trivial to chain. So it's pretty nice. Now you're losing that this age. I think a benefit of chaining a support caster is they have to start choosing, like they're going to lose that guild percentage. They're going to have to look at, do I need the land lost or do I just eat it? And I think older clerics, yeah, people would avoid chaining them. But I think your support casters or dryads are going to get chained a fair bit more this age.
I think so too because this not doesn't seem like it's going to be able to stand on its own, especially this Dryad dwarf that we're looking at. If someone, I think it's people are going to be terrified of this province. So
So you,
I don't think they'll leave it alone.
yeah, when you look at this, are you thinking this is going to be like a 1-to-1 elite in D spec or more like a traditional 3-to-2 or 2-to-1?
depends on the size again. I would go I would go heavy science on this dwarf dryad since you have the econ, and then based on WPA and size is how I would train. I wouldn't want to go too heavy elite because you go too heavy elite and now you're carrying too much net worth. But a decent amount would be there. I would generally have more defense than most other attackers.
Whoa. I just want to point something out to you guys. I just got a message from Zoom saying we've removed your 40-minute meeting time limit or something like that. So if this like cuts out for whatever reason, I might have to start a new one. But it's
That's
still
fine.
recording.
Cool, cool, cool. But yeah, again, you're running into build space problems. It's helped out quite a bit by BE and that flat rate bonus. But you're not fast. Um, you can choose to run TGs to make that offense. I think that's a building you're semi likely to cut in a build like that. But you're looking at racks, you're looking at guard stations, watchtowers. It's a lot of stuff you need. And especially if you need those guilds as a support caster, that's limiting your build space a lot for being an attacker.
Yeah, see, and that's what I was thinking of earlier is, I think they're going to be stretched too thin on their spells and on their build. Because although this province, I mean, looks so amazing, I think it's just getting pulled in too many directions at once. Especially if it's going to be expected to cast support on the kingdom. I just I think that's again, as you said, made too many spells, too many buildings.
I really like any hybrid dwarf. You've got Reflect Magic and Birth Rate, and that's just going to make you a heck of a person to bring down. If you can tank up in the mid wars, offense falls. If you can run enough guard stations to just make it a pain to chain you, it's not going to be easy to keep those peasants down.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of bonuses to go with it.
And you know what I like about is their elite is the same as the specialist. So you could, I guess, in theory, just, train your starting defense and then just train O specs and convert for elites, and that would be your defense. You just have
And
to
out
be
of protection,
careful.
that is the exact thing. As a dwarf dryad, out of protection, I would just max racks, try and keep up, and just train nothing but offense and just use my elites as defense. That out of protection war.
Yeah, so in that sense, it's a great setup. Dark Alpha's a nice cleric last stage because they could just train O spec and then convert for off like elites and then sit home with those elites and they were unbreakable, around min time. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like these dryads with so many spells at their disposal are going to be running out of mana really quickly, and they're not going to have anything for fireballs or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it's going to be, I think early war, you can figure out where you are on the target list pretty easy and you can tailor your spells for that. But mid war, when there's a lot more variation, you're either getting the full use out of your defensive output or you're getting your full use out of your support casting.
Yeah, and I mean they're kind of almost a pure support caster, kind of slow attacker. I mean, it's a danger. It's a turtle province. You got to watch out for these ones. If you leave it too long,
So
run out of
would you
offense.
generally avoid racks or maybe just have that sort of 10 to 12% range to sync up? Or would you, as Win said earlier, potentially overdo your racks and let the rest of your bonuses account for the lack of space?
Yeah, I mean, all of those are the choice.
Those are the options.
Yeah, those are the options. There's not going to be any one right answer for how you run your providence because it's going to depend on how you want to fit into your kingdom. And as the game always goes, it's how you fit in your kingdom, what size you are, what target you are. The standard dryad dwarf for me would overbuild some racks, would overbuild some guilds, and aim to at least sync up the opening wave and the first attacker wave and try and at least participate in those two chains. Beyond that, your build is going to be 100% dependent on how that war goes. This is a choice that is either going to fail miserably or be very successful for your kingdom based on the skill of the person, not the role, for example.
Yeah, I think 100% for this province, you need to be knowing what your enemy's doing and what your kingdom's doing and update that in your head probably every 6 hours to maintain what you need.
Definitely these players I think are, going for the support spells. I wouldn't be surprised if they're casting on the kingdom as well. So again, similar to your Dryad Dwarf in that regard, I guess they're going to be a little bit speedier to offset the Dryad C. I don't really like that. Seems like it's kind of wasted, like having an avian speed buff and a Dryad debuff kind of levels it out. I mean, it cancels each other out, but you're losing, your avian speed bonus just to offset your Dryad. I don't know. I don't like that.
Yeah, your Avian Dryad, our next third place attacker. Another hybrid for that birth rate is your Avian Dryad. What do we got for an elite there? So Avian's got the second highest elite, but you do lose that horse. So you've got no mounted there. So what? 7 plus 11 is an 18.6. Still, you're looking at numbers that are, approximately the same. That's the same elite that Pure Orc has. Of course, minus the Bloodlust. I think in most cases, I don't mind the -1 on defense. It saves you a bit of net worth, and I don't think it's going to make a huge impact. at any point in the game. I think it mostly comes down to, maybe we can ambush them 20% cheaper.
True, but the avian does get anonymity, actually being the only race to get anonymity now. So
Is it used a lot? It's used a lot against Nightmare Kingdoms or when you're doing Nightmare Waves.
or
I
if you're
don't know
the
that I.
lead off attacker,
You
I
know,
often see kingdoms who will lead off with 2 to 3 anonymity, so the enemy can't ambush it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that before as well in the biggest hits for sure. And you know what? To that point, I understand the support spells, but I would have thought maybe more Avian Orc, and I see that's kind of down at the bottom as an honorable mention, just because Orc doesn't really need that, doesn't have to rely on honor so much, and anonymity attacks, throughout the entire age, every attack being anonymity would be something an Avian Orc would probably be best for. So I'm surprised that we're not seeing more of those because that's a great combo.
Yep. But Avian Dryad does give you the ease of, look, I'm Sportcaster, but I'm keeping in sync. And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
not necessarily the best combo that you're going to try and do in there, but it is the, look, I just don't want to fail. And sometimes, especially when you're getting in kingdoms that really just need everything to work because you have 2 leaders who try and micro everything, um, that actually can play out significantly easier for your leadership beyond anything else, because instead of having to micro 20 people, if you know that, okay, these guys are just in sync, I don't have to keep a track of their builds and try and put it on perfectly. You just know you're going to be able to do that. The other advantage the Avian Dryad has is that your builds are actually going to be in for your next wave every time. So you know that you're going to have those hospitals in. You know that you're going to have those training grounds in. You'll never run out of dungeons. So you actually are able to have this little extra sustain that you wouldn't expect out of your standard attacker.
Yeah, and I
So
mean it's
I
going to be
was
good.
just thinking during that, when do I use Anon? And honestly, I almost never Anon, even if I'm leading off a hit in war that's really big, because I just want the honor and I don't care if that guy gets ambushed. I don't care if that attacker ambushes me.
That's
The
how I
and
feel
then
as well.
thinking about the ambush, that is the only time I use Anon is when I'm ambushing someone, because an ambush of an ambush is very cheap and you don't lose your gains from that Anon. And so Avian's the only one that's gonna have that little bonus.
Yep, and you aren't gaining honor or doing losses from the anonymity when you do that. So
Yeah. So Anon, Avian is your best pusher. That's something. There's not really a major drawback to an Avian Dryad.
yeah,
It might not have the. Go
the
ahead.
drawback is your bonuses don't sync, and that's really what the con is that you're not getting that double gains, you're not getting that massive offense. The cons is you're using your setup to build a good provenance, not really focus in one spot.
Yeah, the build space and build or the build cost, build speed is really not transferable to anything, but it is a bonus that scales with the age as well. The bigger you are, the bigger those build costs go. And saving 2 million gold on a late game build swap is really significant.
Not to mention the build speed as well. Again, later in the age when science is a lot higher and you have some points in artisan as well. It really makes a difference to have those extra jobs in place and those buildings built for those extra ticks.
Yeah, you're going to be able to swap in things like a dwarf might. You could even, there's war spoils back for everyone. You can hit, you can get those builds in.
Yeah, that was
If you're
actually that was actually a nice surprise to see war spoils for everybody.
um But yeah, I'd say its biggest con for the avian dryad is that it's sort of lacking anything really significant. It's got the same speed as everyone else. Its elite isn't amazing. Yeah, you're just really saying, "Hey, I'm a support caster that's just a little bit worse than any of my other pure attackers at pure attacking."
And it's interesting, they're going to get the income bonus, but they're also getting a cheap build and cheap troops. So what are they going to do with all that extra GC? Wonder what their plan is.
Yeah, you've got birth rate and gold.
So that's a good, I guess a good, if you, it's a good danger province if you let that one grow. I guess they could just sit at home.
You also have the free food and no need for stables, so your building space is a little bit more flexible.
Indeed, yeah, it's four
Exactly.
food per acre or something like that, I think David said.
Yep, that
So my
scales with time.
experience, if I recall from Dryad all those ages ago, early age, you're looking at maybe 2 to 4% farms. Once you have about 100% production, you can go zero farms. So that's only about halfway into age, depending on how you build your science. You're looking at zero farms versus other people running 5 or 6. I see often on attackers.
And that's pretty
So
I
substantial because that could be up to 21% building space.
Yeah. So my test in Genesis, I got to about 65% food on the pure dryad, and that's where I didn't when I had fertile lands cast, I didn't need um, farms anymore. So
And as a support caster, without a lot of extra spells to cast like that dwarf had, you are going to have a bit more mana to use on the kingdom. It just comes down to what selfies you like. And now there's a lot of good selfies there, so we'll see.
I could check, but I haven't seen. I wonder how many kingdoms are doing a lot of dryad hybrids as their core, or like combinations. Like this combination of dryad dwarf and dryad avian would be a pretty good core.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we'll see any full Dryad kingdoms. I'm sure there's one or two out there, but I feel like they're going to be that sort of I'm a cleric, there's a few of me and everywhere.
Yeah, like
And
maybe.
outside of the one avian cleric kingdom, there's not really going to be that many.
Yeah,
And
exactly, exactly.
when you compare an avian dryad to an avian cleric, I mean, people like the avian clerics. They're like, yeah, I'm fast and I have sustain and I have birth rate. Whereas your avian dryad's like, well, I hit decently and I have gold. And it's not quite the same. It's quite different than your traditional avian cleric. The dryad cleric don't really match each other at all. So people better have different expectations there. Um,
Yeah, again, remember, just because they're saying cleric, it doesn't mean you're getting a casualty reduction.
no, I call all my dryads clerics, and at least half the people hate me for it, and half of them understand. Um,
I feel like
yeah,
that's
cheap build swaps, ability to declare and rebuild is going to be nice.
definitely, a good
We
hybrid,
get
I
to talk
think.
about pure avian later, so we can get
Yeah.
a bit more into how silly that could get in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so our fourth and fifth pick both kind of surprised me, and that is pure human and pure avian. So let's go with human next. And what does that human end up with? With SI active, you're looking at about plus 46% science effectiveness. And with Rev and Fountain of Knowledge, in my experience, with minimal learns, that's going to put you about 30%, 40% books ahead. I'd lean closer to that 40% because I expect any human's going to go hard on their science. It could be higher. And then you've got that additional science bonus, which, that's going to be another 40,000 books a week for 10 weeks, another, million books by the end of the age.
Yeah, we were
And
looking at
based
some
on
of
what I
the
saw, that's another 15% books potentially on their own.
yeah, the books that the big humans in Genesis had were just outrageous. That Sam guy, he in Genesis, he had a ton of books, And I think there was another guy called Pure Human or Just Human or something. He had a ton of books too. Mind you, I couldn't break them. However, my province is recovering tonight, so I think I might be paying some of them a visit and making some people cry in Genesis again.
Yep, I'm looking at a guy in Genesis, 9 a.m. this morning, had 16 million books, 54% housing. So when you start getting 3.5 million books in housing and you start being able to really pump that, you start really running away from the rest of the game. The
Yeah, it's
negative there being that you end up having a lot of net worth and being way out of net worth range of equally sized land provinces. So those thief mages can really start hurting you when no one's really touching you besides that.
Yeah, well, the elite there, you have our first elite of all the core where you're actually looking at a higher defense on the elite than the D spec. And so at least a lot of people that like that science all in sort of game, they're the same people that are going to want to go 100% elite. I think we're going to see 25 EPA humans this age. And they're going to be uncrackable until they send out. But it's, yeah, like you said, it's going to be an absurd amount of net worth.
Yeah, you're basically almost running a semi um, cow at that point. And while cows are good, the human being slightly weaker in thievery and magic, and in most war kingdoms not cow enough to be massacring consistently. It's you're going to end up being in a very unique spot in most kingdoms where um, you can really, really cost your kingdom, or you can have a providence set up to really benefit your kingdom. And that's again, another role, just like the Dryad Dwarf, where you're setting yourself up for failure if you're in a good kingdom but running it poorly, or you're setting yourself up as the god if you're in a ghetto and you are able to really run that thing like it deserves.
Yeah. Can you clarify something for me? The Amethyst Dragon, the
Yes.
ongoing effect of that, humans are not immune to that. It's not a literal two castings of amnesia, right? It's just
Correct.
equivalent to that.
It will be a random effect similar in damage to what two amnesias would be, but it
Okay.
is not something that a human is immune to. You
So,
will permanently be losing your science effectiveness even as human.
yeah. And that happens tick one as well, like the first rollover, like the
That
build.
happens the first tick. That's why the Amethyst Dragon got lowered to 7.5% from 10% because we wanted the initial effect to be about 10% of your science down. So
Awesome.
unless you're killing your dragon in one cast, you're doing anywhere from 9.5 to like 12% science lost after that first tick, where that 2 to 4% is your permanent lowering effectiveness. David did talk at one point that he could possibly include that effect outside of war, just like Genesis had sabotage wizards instead of assassinate wizards, actually just lowering your WPA effectiveness. But for Age 1, it was just the war effect.
All right. And another sort of pseudo bonus to human is with all that science effect. And if they're using some elites as defense, they're going to be one of the races more able to do a quick slay. Because
Correct.
instead of throwing a D spec worth 7 away or the equivalent 9 defense away, you're getting almost a double damage from sending your defense at the dragon. Plus, your human's going to have some pretty crazy valor science if they want it. I looked at about if you run 2 million books in Valor, which I was doing this just maybe I want this as a gimmick. I don't expect all pure humans to do it. If you've got 20% libraries, you got 20% or 2 million books in Valor, you're looking at double dragon damage. So you're looking at sending your defense at a 3.5 to 1 damage to defense, whereas anyone else sending D specs is looking at 1.1 to 1. So Certainly something to be said there. They're lacking offense. That's the thing that just jumps out at me, is they're only hitting people with either a lot more elites or a lot of science and age. So
Yep, and they're coming out early with low thievery, low magic. Pure human, the struggle you're going to have is getting the snowball effect. If you just get beat to shit first war and you lose your first war because of that, it's going to be hard to recover. It's going to be a lack of science there. You're going to be struggling to keep up your you're going to be struggling to keep up your WPA, such that you're not just shelled in those first wars, and that first war, maybe even the second war, you might actually be more of a liability to your kingdom than any other one of these primary choices.
Yeah, and I mean it comes down to the goals of the kingdom again. At the end of the day, maybe this is a great pick for someone who doesn't plan on going to war too much, or someone that just wants to be a growth kingdom or something. Because again, you're looking at a mid to late age, like combination here. Definitely not something that's the best to start out with for sure. Out of protection war, these provinces will be extremely vulnerable to anything with mage or thief power.
and your humans traditionally had that income bonus so they can get those elites, and it stacks with all that science. Humans traditionally have that riot immunity, and without those, they are going to struggle a bit more to get that pure elite. They can't just casually walk into it anymore. If they want to pump really high unis, they're going to be running D specs for most of the age, unless they're sitting on top like an Emirati or any top kingdom sort of in that top 5 land range. It's hard to pump science and elites and wizards, so you're always skimping on something. They don't have that reflect magic anymore.
Yeah, see, my play for them would be to, I guess, not even pump elites. I would be pumping science and wizards primarily throughout my ceasefires, and just relying on them converting during war. That's what you have to do with these guys. You're spreading yourself too thin if you're thinking you can train elites. Or you got to pick one or the other. You can't go in every direction. Either do Wizard's Breaker and some elites, and forego science. Provided you win, then you could forego some of the science in place of Wizard's Breaker. I think would be beneficial for humans, pure
And
humans.
again, if you're human, you put all your 7 starting sciences in econ, you pump a bunch of alchemy. I mean, even by that second end of war ceasefire, you're going to see humans with plus 50% income if they want it.
And see, that's all you need at the end of the day, right?
And that's only going to take 2 weeks if that's what they go for. So
And how
won't
many?
happen right away, but it'll happen fast.
Yeah, and how long is it before libraries really become, something that's worth using? It doesn't
And
take very long.
libraries are multiplicative, I just assume, with all the human bonuses.
Hmm.
Yeah, so your libraries are also 50% better. And on every non human, libraries are already really good late age. So basically, free building efficiency for them, too.
Yeah, so again,
Um,
a human at the mid to end of age is going to be a very dangerous kingdom, especially if they're big on land and have won a lot of wars.
While the dragons are going to be harder to slay when they have all that network, they're also going to be harder to fund.
Yeah, so hopefully they put a ton of books into Valor like you suggested. I mean, I personally love to put, I'd love to get up to 20-25% Valor on my core just for slaying dragons.
I played a single war in Pladovia, the very last war before they're disbanded, and they had a human paladin at +2 O specs, and paladin had like a +35% valor bonus, and he was slaying at 100% bonus, and he would run 20 O specs per acre and just wait for the dragon solo slay. And he also had 1 tick build time, so they'd be able to repump him up. So I could see something pretty similar to that happening. Um, So do you think these pure humans are spread out across the server, or do you think we're going to see a couple kingdoms of pure humans out there?
I've run into a couple pure human kingdoms throughout the past 3 ages, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see not only pure core human kingdoms, but also, at least one kingdom that's maybe even all humans.
Yeah. Do you think human can run a TM,
I
either
mean,
pure or as a mix?
I think it's maybe not, maybe a mix. I don't know about a pure. It would be good late age. You could probably run some form of pure, but I just don't see, maybe against a core, but you're not going to be doing ops against other TMs, so you'd fall into the mix range. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
The fairy
I think
bonus is really what stops it, I think. I think if fairy didn't have that arcane science effect, you would see humans with better WPA or TPA at the end of age, but I
now
don't think you can overcome
now
that fairy
maybe
bonus.
yeah,
maybe just maybe if you put all your scientists into arcane from the very beginning, then maybe you could keep up with them, but I don't see how you could beat an elf fairy.
Yeah.
I think human provides the most utility as far as a possible attacker thief because WPA, yeah, that sucks. It takes time to pump. But if you just screw it, I'm just gonna max my elites, so overtrain my elites so I get extra defense. I dump tons of science in my thievery. I don't need to be immune to fairy. I just need to be able to be night striking the core. And having someone who can act as a attacker thief or tanky thief does provide some utility there. And it's possible you could have enough TPA to be safe from fairies other than the fairy halfling. You don't really need that much um, relative TPA to be safe compared to the WPA that you need to be safe usually. So
And like a couple of our other picks here, they don't have any free build space except for if you include those libraries late age. They don't have any speed. They're using self spells that are, kind of need a lot of spamming. I think scientific insight's only like an 8-day cast usually. And
at
they don't have
most,
a good offense. Their only defense comes if they're pure elite. So they're slow, they don't hit hard, they don't have any inherent defensive bonuses either. So I think you're going to see humans getting thrashed, and then you'll all of the sudden, like you'll blink once, and they'll just be these humans that seem untouchable. We'll see if they are or not.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
it really it comes down to with human, your beginning of the age, you have to be very careful with what you do because you're so vulnerable to so many different things. I mean, you don't have to worry about um, being attacked too much, but I'd be worried about spells and ops. Like if I was a thief, my first target's gonna be a human, most likely, especially early in the age, just because of their TPA debuff that they get. So, I'd be looking at humans and dryads probably. Dryads less approachable simply because of its support spells if they are actually keeping those support spells up. I doubt anyone's keeping Illuminate Shadows up out of war though. So, I mean, again, I would look at humans and dryads for Rob Vault's targets first.
your humans, they're going to have a lot of elites that cost a lot of wages, and with no birth rate bonus, you're going to see some two PPA humans, and all the income science in the world won't help that. You're going to need you can mitigate some with bookkeeping, but I don't see people push bookkeeping that hard. Though,
Yeah, and I
with
think
that sort of bonuses humans have, it's certainly viable.
definitely probably the
I
only way.
I might recommend, if you can spare the books, 600,000 in bookkeeping as you get to mid late age.
Yeah,
I
that's
experimented with it a few ages ago. I was an undead, which absolutely did not need wage science, but I just wanted to see how it scaled and how it felt. And you're looking at minus 40% with a couple libraries with less than a million books. As a human, you might even look at essentially free wages late age if you go that route.
Yeah, and I think that's what humans are going to have to do, especially if
I'm
they
sure
expect
I'm sure
to.
someone reading this will be like, "Hey, did you know that with libraries and human, you can get minus 99% wages with only blah 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 books?" And I'm going to think to myself, "Well, humans are unbeatable." I think they could probably do that for less than 2 million. Just
Yeah,
guessing.
I'm trying to remember. I think I got up to 25% on about a million or 1.2 million books, something like that. So it's totally viable. Again, especially if you're pumping econ, like we were talking about in the beginning, putting all your scientists into econ and, running as many as nine, sorry, you do like, you know, 7 and maybe go up to 9 in econ before going into military or arcane. But personally, I like to at least have one scientist in every category with the rest in, I put the rest in econ or something.
Yeah, I usually do the full econ start and branch out. Um, I think there's a little bit of variation this age. You don't have those personality specific book productions. And I think that led to quite a few interesting strategies where I had attackers, they would start with 3 in econ, 2 in arcane, and they would only build military for the rest of the age. And, when you have 30 scientists pushing max uni military books, you end up with, 40, 50% tactics and 30% gains and 30% DME. And suddenly all your numbers are looking really scary compared to a TM. Then on the other hand, you got TMs with 300% channeling and 200% thievery. So
Yeah, and
a
that's,
little less specialization this age, a little bit more general bonuses, I expect.
that's something I was really pushing in the strategy channel and in just the Utopia talk over the past few ages was to, people should really take advantage of those books increases that the personalities were getting because I found everyone usually liked to go a little bit rainbow on their sciences. But even before they had those personality bonuses, I was very heavily in favor of starting with all scientists in one category and pumping that category first, depending on what the purpose of that province was. So for my core, it would be regular core, not including clerics, would be purely military.
And our last 100 plus core of the age is our pure avian. Now, I don't think this surprises anyone, but what's your hot take on pure avian?
So my personal take is avian basically means no Dryad Kingdom can wave you, because that is both a pro and a con. Because if someone's attacking you with minimal racks and they're doing a land wave outside of war, they're on 18-hour attack times. You got an active kingdom, you log in. Oh, look, we got wave two ticks ago. Okay, well, everybody spam up the cell phones, log in, everyone massacre wave. Everybody gets in, everyone massacre wave, everybody gets in, and then you start chaining. And there's just no way to really survive a double massacre wave from a whole kingdom and even come out even remotely capable. So for these pure avian kingdoms, if you're looking for war, you're going to have to start arranging your war or be waving. You got to be an aggressive kingdom. You can't wait for people to try and wave you. That's my initial take.
What I like about an avian is that I think you can play bait. I think you can run really greedy out of war builds. You can be 70% guilds and 30% unis, and you
Hmm.
get waved in, and you can rebuild in 3 ticks and maybe still beat
Exactly.
them home.
Exactly.
So I think one of your big hidden bonuses of a pure avian is that you're gonna pump better than other people out of war.
Definitely. Definitely. I think that's the benefit to Avian is again they're going to have that speed all around. when it comes to troops, buildings, and overall just attacking. I mean, that's their benefit. Anyone who, can look at their phone or their computer and log into Utopia the most throughout the day is going to do the best with this avian kingdom, of course. Of course, planning has something to do with it. You don't necessarily have to do that, but their attack times are going to be pretty fast, so they're definitely going to outmatch most of the other attackers. Literally just fly away. Um, and I think they're going to have really strong ceasefires as well. Very strong ceasefires.
Yeah, it's something people don't always take into account is when you're saving 6 hours of build time on either end, that's upwards of 15% more pump time. That's something that dwarves have always sort of secretly had that not everyone thinks about is, end of war ceasefire is only 100 hours. If you save 10 hours, that's 10% more. And that's not just of income, that's of anything and everything you need. Same goes with the train time stacking. You can build later, you can train later.
Yeah, and that's, my biggest, my most, like my favorite um, thing, and I've been experimenting with artisan more frequently, trying to get that up to at least 20% most of the time. And then, of course, army train time, 20 to 25% from the military category. Makes a huge difference. It really, really does. I mean, you can train right down to the last second. I think I was getting as low as 7 hour. This was without avian builds. This is just a standard race. Like last stage was like a 9 hour build and an 11 hour train time, and then a 9 hour train time and a 7 hour build, which is crazy. So if you think about that now, you add the avian bonus to that. They're probably in World of Legends by the end of the age. They could very likely see a 4 to 6 build and train. So yeah, their ceasefires are going to be rock solid, I think.
And
Just
even in war, with the massive credits you're going to see, you're going to be able to see an avian be like, well, I'm going to swap in 20% forts, 20% watchtowers, and add in, 60 specs per acre. And there is no way an enemy can counter that. It's just going to come in. And now you've got an unbreakable core. It can raise the rest of the war, mass rest of the war. There's certainly a lot going on there. You don't have that sort of BE. Usually you tie in that build speed with BE because that's the traditional dwarf combo. So their builds aren't going to be quite as strong, but at that level of speed, yeah, I think in the right hands, you're going to see, and with the right micro, you're going to see some really strong tactical play. And I think that's something that's a little bit mixing on your attackers in Utopia. So I like to see this option in the game.
absolutely. And remember again, on your pure attacker, no stables means, upwards of 14% build space or 10% build space, depending on how aggressively you like to mount your troops.
It also means your
Absolutely.
horse is stolen. So if you're someone who slacks just a little bit and your army in 10 minutes, you're not losing all your horses in 10 minutes.
Not vulnerable to steel war horses either, which should be fairly strong this age.
Yep.
And that's another bonus to your end of war ceasefire is you save what 30 hours of 15% build space.
I
The
think,
one
oh, go ahead,
you go.
Persian.
I was just gonna say the one major drawback from this pure avian is player burnout, leadership burnout. If your kingdom is a slacker kingdom and can't hit quickly, it is very likely that a wave that you get done in 1 hour, opening wave, becomes 2 hours. The next wave becomes 3 hours. The next wave, and now everybody is always in. So you need to be able to plan for set orders, or your leader is just going to be up 24 hours a day organizing your
There's
attacks.
unlimited space for micromanagement, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. We've always sort of had that avian tack thing, but now you add in the build swaps to that, and I've always
Yep.
considered dwarf harder to play if you're not really into it than a fast attacker. Because end of the day, an orc warrior with Godspeed and 10% racks is the same speed as an avian tact. So I've always found the avian tact thing a bit of a meme because unless you're also stacking it with other things, it's not particularly different. Cons. Burnout, player, and leadership. Yeah. Let's see, is there anything else I can think about for avian I wanted to mention? Again, you're a little bit lower on offense, but you've got the build space kind of makes up for it. One of your all your biggest bonuses are don't exactly translate into mechanical bonuses. They're a lot more tactical, so I think they might be underestimated quite a bit. One thing, the double stacking build time and build cost, you aren't getting the same value out of the build cost the second time around. Sure, you are as a percentage, but your raise fees are flat if you need to rebuild. And as a raw value, you're only saving 25% versus that 50% gold. So, hey, maybe if it was additive, we could have 100% build time, build cost. Now that would be something. And yeah, even in war, I mean, you can't always afford to raise your buildings. It's expensive. All right, I know what I was going to say. They don't have birth rate because they're pure. So you've got an avian without birth rate. It's going to throw a few people off, I think.
Yeah.
So I look over these five, and what do you think of these five attackers? What do you think's most overrated, and what do you think's the true best?
Of the five, I would probably go with Pure Avian being the best, but it's also the riskiest to your player base because I know I specifically cannot run a kingdom that has attack times under 10 hours as standard. We ran Avian Tac one age and decided that we would never do it again because it was just not viable to leadership and to sitting, because as soon as you start getting out of sync, there was people were getting stuck in middle of the night, and since it's 3 a day, you're every one of those hits is going to be middle of the night, and there's no way to get around it because it's either going to be 2 hours into your sleep or 2 hours early, and it takes days to get slightly pushed the right way, and that was just not something my kingdom can sustain. But I think as far as actual strength goes, it's probably the strongest. As far as the weakest on this list of top five, I personally think Avian Dryad. I think mixing your bonuses and trying to cancel things out never really works unless you were going with Dwarf Undead, since they actually cancel out.
Your thoughts, Wind?
Just give me a second here. Sorry, we're just doing some things off to the side here. Sorry, what were we looking at, guys?
I
Just of
was
the five attackers, which ones did you think was the best? You think there's any hidden OP-ness of them?
Can you scroll down, Smiles, just so I can take a look at the list at the bottom there?
this is all other
Dork.
stuff. Just
Okay.
the
Oh yeah.
Just of the top five.
Oh, sorry, of the top five.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, Orc is gonna, they kind of all have their weaknesses. I mean, Orc was my favorite, my first call from the very beginning. So, I also heavily favor Orc. So for me, it's something that, it plays itself. You're really gonna have to mess up to not play that one properly. In terms of Dryad Dwarf, you're kind of tanky. It's a safe pick, very very relaxing play style. Same with Avian Dryad. Your pure human combination. To be honest, it doesn't look like too much of the server is actually planning to go to war. They kind of just looks like they want to have like more relaxing ages, more sitting around, except for these pure avians at the bottom there. These guys, I think, we're going to see a few all avian kingdoms rushing to the top. of the war scene, which will ultimately bring them to the top of acres and net worth as well. In terms of hidden weaknesses, I think, again, as we talked about, human's going to be weak early age. Pure avian's going to be weak closer to the end, I think, just because they don't really have any builds that stack on their effectiveness. Sure, they get free this and free that and faster this and faster that, but human could probably outdo them in the late age. Again, human being weak to offensive spells and ops, so that will be their downfall. Avian Dryad and Dwarf Dryad, again, they're going to be pushing the limits of their build space and mana, so it's going to be pretty easy to disrupt their ability to do things because they're already going to be fairly tapped out, provided the kingdom is actually using them to their best advantage. So I think at the end of the day, Orc, for a good reason, was the safe pick for an attacker core, and which is why everybody went that way. I mean, regardless of whether Mickey won't pick orcs, there's certainly a lot of kings I know wanted orcs to be great again. So I think in terms of attacker core, orc is a good combination, and provided they can sustain their troops and not kill themselves out, orc is going to be, I think one of the stars of the age. But definitely, like, you can't discount the cleric, dryad, dwarf, or avian dryad. They're always going to be on the scene. And again, like you said, watch out at the end. You're going to have a bunch of superhumans running around. So if you go to war against them, you better be prepared because your simple TM overpower trick is not going to work that late in the age. You're really going to have to work, or you're really going to have focused ceasefires to make sure that your Wizard's Breaker is high enough to do significant damage to these humans, because you really have to bring the op and spell power against humans to beat them.
All right. I think I'm gonna piss a few people off. I'm gonna say most overrated on this list is the pure orc. I think it's good. I think it's gonna do what it does well. I don't think it's gonna be winning as much as they want it to. I think orc. I think any pureblood needs to take advantage of that town watch, and I'd say orc is probably in the best situation to do that. So if you've got a lot of suiciding orcs, I mean, like going really all in on the offense, I think that's the only way they're going to win it. I think if they try to hedge their bets, if you have one or two or four pure orcs, they could probably do a tanky build. That's what I would do with them. I
Hmm.
think if you have a whole core of pure orcs, you're going to want all in suicide offense to use that town watch. Otherwise, they're going to burn out too fast.
Yeah, and you know what? I
And
hope these orcs, these people that are playing orcs, watch this video, because this is a really important comment about orcs. It's one of those races that you have to go all in, or you have to be a defensive turtle, because that's just the nature of the orc. I've seen it before. I've won with both ways before. I've lost both ways before. What Smiles said is entirely true. So, really commit to one or the other. Do not, try to hedge your bets with this particular combination.
as for, I think, the strongest on this list, um, maybe I don't think it's the strongest core overall, but I like the Dryad Dwarf. I think Hybrid Dwarf is going to show itself this age, regardless of what the other race is. I think with a birth rate bonus, those defensive bonuses, those defensive spells, and economic bonuses, I don't think it'll be beat. I think it'll take the age, whatever the hybrid is, whether it's Dryad, human, orc, take your pick. I think the half dwarf is going to win the age myself.
See, when you look at, humans, like pure humans versus Dryad, you look at the elite numbers, you think, okay, Dryad Dwarf has got higher offense to defense, whereas humans higher defense to, or sorry, is relatively lower offense to its higher defense number, compared to Dryad Dwarf. Both theoretically would be marching the same amount of, troops and leaving the same amount home. So the numbers there are kind of similar in that regard. Both armies, if they're turtling they're going to be leaving the same amount of defense home. So, don't let those numbers fool you. Your 16-9 human is no different really than your 19-7 dryad at the end of the day.
And as for human, I think the number one thing that's going to hold the pure human back is just how good the fairy science is. Because usually the late age sage, you get those, micro kingdom human sages that they've got a lot of housing and building efficiency and it's fine. But in the war tier, I like my, science people to have a lot of arcane science and to have, 3, 4 WPA and some really good channeling bonuses, 4 or 5 TPA and some really good crime bonuses. But and to the point that where it's hard for a lot of TMs to deal with them. But the fairy bonus to science is so overwhelming in arcane that I don't think the human's going to be able to step up that way. And if they're forced to go all in on eco and military science, I think they're missing out this age.
Yeah, I think human is just going to have to go with, a relative amount of channeling, but they're going to be having to work the shielding. I think that's the only thing that's going to save human. And of course, that extra book generation and putting more scientists into arcane is really going to benefit them come the middle of the age.
Uh, Other attackers, anything you're surprised not to see on that list?
I'm upset that we're not really seeing too many gnomes. I think people really are just like not seeing that gnome credit bonus and dark elves as well. Some interesting points were brought up to me by some other parties regarding dark elf pures and dark elf elves. Um, those are going to be fireball monsters. I think someone did a calculation and told me that 25 or was it 50 fireballs on a single province is enough to PK the province. So I think everyone should be a little bit concerned by something like that.
I think there's only about 60 gnomes on the server.
Yeah.
I thought I'd see a few more, but it makes sense to me. In terms of their thievery, they just don't match up to the halfling. The sabotage damage sort of equals the stealth bonus. You don't get that TPA. Credits, I think if credits this age had scaled with the offense increase, that you would see a lot more value in Gnome. But honestly, I don't see any war under 96 hours where people use their credits. I think 100% of wars under 4 days, people are going to have big banked credits, unable to spend them. And so I don't think that gnome bonus is going to come into play in war. And if it's just sort of this out of war thing, yeah, I don't
I think it would
think
be
about out of
this
war very much.
the situation for gnome would be a situation where you want to be putting all your houses or something maybe into thieves' dens and doing a bunch of kidnaps so that you can pump your peasants, even overpopulate yourself so that you can draft more troops every tick. I think that would be the only similar play to use those credits along with an expropriation ritual. Um, that would be the only way you could hope to try
I think
even
gnome can be a
attempt
good
that.
scrappy individual pick. Anything below the top tier, even in the top tier, if you have someone microing it well, it's going to have potential. But I think
That's just it.
on the face of a whole kingdom, it's just sort of lacking something.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna be one of those sleeper provinces, like a gnome dwarf or something silly like that is just gonna sneak up on people at the end of the
Yeah.
war.
But it's going to need to bump in a lot of thieves, right? Because you can plant in
Mhm.
20 specs per acre of credits and go all in and then just get night strike. What are you going to do about it, right? But
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can absolutely train 8 TPA at a time. If you're in a war where you're like, well, if I keep all my elites home as gnome, they basically can't chain me. You could train 8 TPA on that gnome legitimately. And I think
Hmm.
that's the sort of thing where you're like, oh, now they have another TM with insane thief power and damage. Where did that come from? So I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
that's going to be your play.
And that
I
that can
Yeah, it
play.
would only take like 2 uniques to get that
Yeah, so
on
wait,
that.
we were talking about this before actually. Gnome just takes all of the chain's soldiers, right? So they pump up their gnomes when they have excess credits to spend, they just dump it on the gnomes, and the gnomes train up. So I mean,
The
unless you have an
one
entire kingdom of gnomes, then
the one role I was expecting more of was dwarf orc. Not dwarf orc, dwarf undead. Um, dwarf undead to me just seems like
It's not even
no
on the
food.
honorable mention
Yep.
list.
It's not even on the honorable mention. It's no food, max sustain. You run 15 of those in a kingdom, and I mean, no one's going to be chaining you quickly. No one's going to be out sustaining you. If you literally just max game that a whole war, that would be a very strong setup. And as long as you can keep your dwarf undead going, oh, it is a honorable mention then. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Um,
there's actually more
I
of those than most of those other things I listed. I don't know how
yeah,
I missed
we
that.
just missed that first
I
one.
am
Maybe if
not
this
surprised.
survey list was a little bit cleaner, David. No,
Yeah, I'm
actually,
not surprised that was a
that's
choice
right there.
because
That's number 6. I had no idea.
out
Yeah,
of protection, that is a monster, literally just max gain and not worry about anything. Most wars, you have the birth rate bonus, you have your town watch, your sustain, your tank ability. I mean, it is going to be ground to dust with by thief mages, but if your thief mages have to focus on your attackers, they're not winning the thief mage battle. So
yeah, exactly. And I mean,
I was expecting there to be more of those, honestly, than pure human, even. But
I think people just, some people just don't like the idea of undead. Maybe they don't think there's a challenge to it, but to be honest, it's a great combination. A bunch of people were talking about it. They kept, several people are asking, does the dwarf, bone penalty to food get canceled out by the undead non-use of food? And yes, the undead, because of the undead, the dwarf does not need the food. So I think, everyone that was asking in Mugo is probably the ones that are playing uh,
I
dwarf
really
undead.
like it. You've got Dwarf, which is a hybrid's absolutely your most defensive and economical hybrid. And then you combine that with the undead, and you've got free build space and the sustain, the number 1 sustain you can have. You've got plague in there, and ghost workers. It just comes down to, can you live with the book production?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right?
It's a
Is the book
lot of
production.
minus science, and
That just
some people
means,
just say it's unviable. I would say that unless you've done significant learns,
right?
late age, you won't do it.
Yeah.
You're gonna be facing people with more BE than you that aren't dwarves.
And I think this is the scenario, where this particular race may be the reason it wasn't picked as much as person would thought, because it is a lot weaker in the late age, but starting to mid, this is definitely going to be one combo to watch out for.
I don't know, even late age, I wouldn't put it past that to be a strong pick, even without the science, since science is calculated higher power exponential than square. Um, you're not carrying, if you don't have the
2.125.
science, if you don't have the science, you're not carrying the net worth. While that might not be a lot of net worth, you just have an overall slightly weaker providence. And if you carry a little bit more net worth on a few extra strong thief mages, it doesn't really matter if their whole core is a little bit stronger than my whole core overall. If your thief mage is safe and big, if no one's breaking my top 4 thief mages, you got 6, but my whole core can sit there and get wailed on for 6 days. 6 to
I
8
think
day
undead.
war, you're gonna win.
I think undead are going to see more success than the amount that they were picked, but I don't think that if more of them were picked, that they would necessarily increase how much success they saw. Um, minus 60% book production without learns comes out to like minus 35% science, I think I heard someone say.
Yeah.
And that's sort of in line with how undead used to be, but they don't have a spectacular elite.
It's still a
They don't
pretty
have any
pretty
of their
decent.
other sort of traditional bonuses they've had recently, but it's a lot of military losses. Plague is
Plague is
really
nice.
nice. I
Especially with so
barely
many
played undead for 2 years, and then I played one age of a whole bunch of undead, and it's like, wow, Plague is unfair.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And with so many non-undead combinations here, like look at our top five, a lot of people are going to be vulnerable to plague. Granted, your dryads might be able to help you with that if you can't even cast Nature's Blessing on yourself. You're kind of in a bad spot if you can't even do that. Um, but absolutely, this is a very tough combo because that getting plague really lowers your military efficiency when you're just sitting at home and you have very little defense because you just marched your entire army. It's amazing how much it brings down your at-home defense.
Adds to more multi-taps, it adds to more kills, it adds to, goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and that was a strategy that I had in my playbook about 10 ages ago was kind of like an undead strike force where you send in the undeads first and hopefully land that plague, and then the rest of the troops go in after. Kind of helps mitigate using something like Nightmare, because you could just MV them, get plague on them, maybe, have destroyed some of their forts or something beforehand, and then you get some extra hits in with all of your core.
There's only 2 forks on the age. I was saying Fork Kingdom cutlery theme, but apparently I was not agreed with.
Can't find a spoon.
There was forks, storks, and nomads were the best combos I heard up.
Forks. That's good.
All right. I think that about covers it for core. We can get into the nitty gritty if we want. For TMs, I think it was very predictable. About 70% of all TMs are either fairy half or fairy elf or fairy. So what you've got here is basically a fey rogue, a fey mystic, and a fey heretic sage combo is basically what you're looking at.
Yeah, your Fei just doesn't have Nightmare, which would have been game breaking to put on Fei.
Oh yeah. No, the proposed and the revised fairies were off this charts game breaking. I wouldn't have seen a reason to have anything other than 50 fairies at that point.
Yeah.
Scaled back a little bit. All of these guys, you've got Tree of Gold. That's really making your elite pump. It's the best income bonus in the game. Any fairy makes more money than a dryad for the most part.
During End of War Ceasefire.
Yes. No, the Tree of Gold's basically only an End of War Ceasefire thing. Occasionally you see it in war. Out of war, it's just something to use your mana on. But it'll in some cases double your gold in an End of War Ceasefire. In other cases, the worst you'll ever do is plus 50%. Fairy elf. So as much as people worry about that increased training cost for your elves, the +1 mana turns into a lot of Tree of Gold.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of self-cancels itself out.
Yeah,
Fairy halfling.
That's an issue.
You've got a rogue with plus 100% guilds. So I think some people are going to be really upset at all the 5 WPA rogues out there.
Oh yeah.
I think that's going to be a major issue for people.
Yeah, because I think recently I've noticed a lot of people have become very comfortable in using exposed thieves and sabotage wizards are being used a lot more in recent ages.
And your halfling fairy now has Mystic Aura. So say you want to play defensive and you need to use your stealth. Somebody who wants to cast ET on me every tick, you're now trying to not only cast Exposed Thieves on me and beat me to my stealth use, you're also auto-failing the first spell and or getting an attacker to purposely fail, which slows down your ability to cast and increases the likelihood that
I've never cast Mystic
stop
Aura
you
before.
first.
The fact that other people think I've cast it means I don't have to cast it. It's self spells are 3 mana, man. I don't give a shit. If you're gonna cast on me and you're only gonna have 50 or 30% success anyways, because I've got a lot of wizards, then I'm trading 1.5 offensive spells for 1 self spell that isn't even a guaranteed negation. If Mystic Aura canceled the first success, I would always cast it probably, but considering it just costs 2 mana on a core in 9/10 of situations when you're up against a good kingdom, it's mostly the fact that it could be there, just a little bit of activity drain on your opponent. Okay, let's actually look at what we got here. Fairy Halfling has a 8/17. No, that's not right. 8/13 elite.
Mm-hmm.
Halfling's +1, not -1.
Yes. 8/13. 6 + 7.
Let's see what.
So you've got +1 stealth. That's 33% more. That's in line with your rogue. Access to all your rogue ops. You've got no TD bonus, and that is a lot of free build space or a lot of free TPA. Now, your halfling this age is 35% TPA. That's outstrips what we see most recent ages. The fact that Fairy already has invisibility kind of makes the invisibility on halfling really moot. There's very few halflings that aren't fairies in the age. There's 20 halflings. There's 40 halfling something else. Mm-hmm. It's not a significant amount. Fairy halfling, you're looking at a base -60% thief loss. So you're going to end up with that 80 to 95% minus loss range with some TDs in, but you won't see that full 75% TPA, 96% minus losses that you see normally. But I think with the Fairy Arcane bonus, that's going to be worth at least 25% TPA, probably more than that on a lot of halflings or a lot of TMs in the late age. Stacking with that halfling, I think you're going to see probably the strongest rogues we've ever, well, not ever seen, but seen in a long time.
Yeah, at least the highest TPA halflings we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, you're not going to have any. You've had a lot of bonus damage ages, so you're not going to see a significant bonus damage output from any fairy that isn't a fairy.
Yeah, the weakness to your halfling fairy versus the rogue in the past is that your fairy has 100% guilds and your fairy has 400% guilds. So anyone who's trying to attack wizards, the fairy almost has to do it every 3 days in war, because any fairy running that gets attacked wizards can just go, well, I'm still unbreakable. Everybody funnel me money and I will repump my WPA. So in a long war, you can't just, oh, look, this guy's open.
Absolutely. With a rogue having 100% guild effectiveness, not only are you looking at high WPA on them, you're also going to see the ability to do a lot more duration spells. So normally a rogue, it's costly to try and fit 20% guilds on a fairy rogue traditionally to try and get those max duration chastities and blizzards and PFs and greeds. Now, since you can run only 10% guilds as a halfling fairy, they can cover a lot of those core casts and those easier spells and good durations. They're saving a lot of selfie mana. So I think there's a lot of added strength there that might be surprising to some people and not surprising to others.
Yeah, I mean, definitely good all three are good combos. I mean, you can't really go wrong, especially with FA Halfer. I mean, I really wanted to play this kind of combination for a while, so this is going to be a fun age for me.
I think you could have kept the minus 25% income on Fairy just to make everyone squirm. The minus 10% in war, it's going to cancel out with Heroes Inspiration. So I was a little bit like, oh, they in war they're probably going to have more income with HI up than they used to. Um, minus 10% is pretty minor. They've got Rev, good enough, right? They've got Fountain of Knowledge now. Heck, they're doing even better.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
that's wicked science for them.
Cons to a halfling fairy. I don't think there is any. I don't think there's any real cons to any fairy TM this age. I think they're all just.
Not really.
It's
No.
all about how you perceive the relative strength of the core of this game, but
So
all
Yeah.
your pure TM are pretty similar. Now looking
Yeah,
at your
all
fairy elf. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, yeah, all your thief mages, while they have negatives, those negatives aren't an actual hit to being a thief mage. They're a hit to, can you pull this into something that would make you a game breaking hybrid? So
Oh, that's something I didn't mention. I meant to. You have plus 50% birth rate on your rogues right now. You are not going to be able to fire.
correct. You will struggle to fireball them.
yeah, it's definitely going to be a little bit tougher to control your rogues this age. Definitely going to have to be using, something like your Fey Phase or possibly a Fey Elf to do the fireballs against that combination. Um, and I don't think you're going to see too many halflings in the Warring Kingdoms. I think most of the mid-range kingdoms are even going to see the better value of having a Fey halfer over a pure halfling or halfling something else. Again, that's why we're seeing the highest number for them. Oh, I think we just lost Smiles.
Yep, just you
So
and me.
yeah. So
Uh, since you're editing this, you can pause it and we'll see if he reconnects.
oh, I'm not editing this one. This
Oh,
is
okay.
live.
Oh,
All
cool.
these warcasts are actually going to be live. Just the first couple videos that we did, this specifically that first one. For all the viewers out there, that first video, which turned into a 35-minute video, now available on the YouTube channel, Utopia News, was originally about an hour and 45 minutes. But turns out, who would have guessed it? I like to talk a lot, and about most of that was just stuff that could have been cut out, and I was able to replace it with some more direct speech questions. So it helped a little bit, increase the watchability of the video because some of the comments have been that some of these videos are a little bit long, but I mean, there is a lot to cover, and we are doing very in-depth analyses of, these things, which is very beneficial. And I think, even after this age is complete, this kind of detailed breakdown, especially that we're doing here, people can take away and use age over age. It's something that the Warring Kingdoms and Top Kingdoms have always done. What I think has been detrimental to the game is the secrecy and, the behind closed doors kind of secret clubs where, the top end has not been willing to share the secrets so much. But I think, together as a community, we've been breaking down a lot of those walls over the past many ages. And, a lot more of this, is becoming, available to players who are just starting out. I know, a lot of players are happy that we do these things and that the news is running and that we have players like Stratocastle, whether or not they actually play the game, they're still posting some extremely valuable information in the forums. So I definitely recommend that everybody check out the forums. I'm not sure what happened to Smiles' connection. Let's just check in on
He's reconnecting. He's
Okay.
trying.
Cool. I'm in there too. Oh yeah, he must be on DSL or something. But yeah, so I mean, these are very important videos, I think, and it's too bad our time zones are so different. I know Mickey wanted to join us on this discussion, and you know, Smiles was ready to go on this discussion at you know, what would have been 1 p.m. I think mine in Persian Cat's time. Um, you know, and I was definitely going to be at work for several hours, you know, even after that. So there was absolutely no way that this discussion would have happened at that time. Although, you know, I do welcome any of the warcasters to run their own podcasts if they have something that they want to do at a different time, you know, when not all of us are available. So that's something, you know, the community can look out for in the future. I definitely think Smiles and Saps are probably the most likely to do something like that, as they will already have weekly, you know, probably on a Friday or Saturday, a Warcast that I was talking about before. Basically, it'll do what the newspaper did, and you know, it'll look at all the wars currently in progress, kind of talk about them a little bit, maybe investigate a few of them a little bit more deeply, and see what's actually going on. You know, see if we can maybe even call the war before it finishes. So, you know, there's definitely a lot to look forward to. Just a moment here. I just need to give Smiles the link again. There we go. Double time. So yeah, you know, it's let's get Smiles back in
But
here.
anyways, let's go back to the rogue discussion then. So while we were waiting on Smiles, I went back and double checked. So the last time rogues actually had your guild bonus was age 82, and that was back when your mystics had 150%, your rogues had 50%, and your
Paladins
plus
had 50%,
effectiveness.
didn't they?
Yeah, so I'm going back to it was age 82. Rogue had plus 50% guilds, Mystic was 150, and your channeling and crime sciences were plus 60%. And I remember going back to those
Yeah.
ages, that's where you had early 80s, you had thief mages that were basically unstoppable in their given role. And that's kind of where the fairy elf, and fairy halfling are going to be. But since fairy gives it to crime, channeling, shields, cunning, and invocation, you can kind of choose as a halfling, do I really want to overcharge crime, or do I actually want some defensive channeling? And defensive channeling should definitely stop your core, your chain core, from casting on the halfling now.
In most cases, I will run my rogues with more channeling than crime. I think that's almost standard these days. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong there.
Yeah, I mean,
On except for when you're targeting other rogues or heretics, there's no situation where your TPA is going to be not good enough. But so much of your success comes down to that WPA that it's really important to be pushing that hard. Uh, yeah, I think super rogues this age, I think a rogue that's big with honor is gonna be unstoppable, except for the exception of some really high wizard pumped fairy. And I think that's going to be the role of fairy this age as a anti TM that can really specialize in one thing.
Yeah, and like you said, with the increased Wizard's Breaker on those Fey Halflings, I think that's going to be the only way to deal with them.
which gets us going then on to your fairy elf. So you want to take the lead on that one, Smiles?
So you've got the same bonus, I believe. You've got a 813 elite. Where am I writing? It's not in the right spot. There we go.
30 instead of
And
35% bonus. Yep.
yeah, you've got +1 mana again, so you're looking very similar. And with meteor showers, you're looking identical to every mystic for the last 100 ages. You've got some mana, you've got some uh, guilds. That's from the fairy. You've got meteor showers. That's the word.
Yeah.
I think I love running my mystic hybrids in general. I think with the combat games, that's just not going to happen so much. I don't think your elves are going to be risking the attacks. If they happen to have O specs, that's fine. I think you're going to see a lot less elves willing to send out elites. They're going to struggle with the defense as is. You're usually struggling a lot of WPA. It only leaves you so much income. It only leaves you so much EPA. Honors from bonus honors are kind of negligible. It's it's a third of what's left from an orc as a bonus. So if you get to Prince, great. You get 2% extra TPA and WPA.
It's kind of not even really a thing.
Yeah. But yeah, meteor showers is important. I think it's a little bit less important this age on enemy core. I think you're going to be using it to just slam any elites that happen to be home, some core that use elites as defense, and mostly just wearing down other TMs. I think there's a lot of situations where going 1 out of 5 casting MS on an enemy TM is going to be significantly higher value than getting 5 core MS, just for the amounts of defense you're hitting and how much it lowers their ability to slay future dragons, things like that.
Yeah, and that's probably a good recommendation for everybody listening. You know, um, meteor showers is very useful on TMs, enemy TMs. Core, it's okay, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of counterproductive unless you're MSing the guys that you're fireballing, and even then, you're kind of overdoing it.
MS it scales directly with defense because that's what you're hitting. And so you should usually have your MS orders targeted by over under on a specific defense. When I play against a lot of tanky core, I'm very happy to literally chain their lowest defense every single wave while I MS their highest defense and just let it do its percentage based damage.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
perfect sense.
Given the ratio of elite offense to despec defense, I don't think we're going to see a lot of tanky core this age, at least not in a defense sense, maybe in a guard station sense. So, unless people are running like 10 despecs per acre where they've got elites home, it's not going to be super important. And, it is what it is. It's like a mystic. It's not as amazing as mystic has traditionally been. Like you're not going to just throw elf onto a random province and be happy with it, whereas traditionally you could just throw mystic onto any race and be happy with it. So it fills a very singular role. I would probably expect people run as few of them as they need, whereas I've in recent ages been happy to run 5, 6, whatever amount of mystics just because I can always use that mana. And while that's still true, I don't feel like I need the elf aspect of it to do what I need to do. I think my fairy halflings or fairy fairies are going to be able to cover up that mana gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of see Elf as like Fairy Elf as the weak link here. I'm kind of surprised that people chose it more over the Fei Fei.
I mean, you still need meteor showers, is what it amounts to. Is not having meteor showers in a kingdom just drastically gimps you to the point of it being
Traditionally, it
difficult.
does, but in this age, it might not be the hugest deal. It's not going to put a big dent in peasants with the birth rates, and if the core defense is less significant, well, maybe you could have gone without it. It's been done. Um, I was thinking, yeah, maybe I can just live with 2 fairy elves, one on each time zone, and they cast meteor showers, and that's what they do, and everything
Hmm.
else can be done by someone else.
No, exactly, and maybe you can get them, yeah, cast
But
some other spells, but
when you do compare it to a traditional like elf mystic, you've got the invis and minus losses of fairy. So you are going to be able to do a lot more aggressive things with your thieves. So, I mean, I don't know if you're going to have the same MTPA, but you're going to have a lot more thievery sustain than you'd traditionally have. You maybe don't need as many thieves dens. So
Yeah, this should be the perfect province to have doing your night strikes on core or thievery, just on anyone.
petty theft,
Yeah.
night strikes, it's a lot more sustainable. It's really hard as a mystic if you don't have, even if you have 10% or 15% thieves dens, if you're night striking someone big and you're either lowering your sends or you're risking a lot of losses. So, invis is plus 20% TPA. You've got that arcane science bonus. I think, I almost kind of take it back. I think actually the fairy elf's going to be able to use its thieves and sort of hold its own relative to last age just fine. Yeah, look at that. Changing my mind on the fly. And yeah, when you're fairy, you've got Mage's Fury and you've got Invis, so you can kind of do everything no matter what. As mentioned earlier, the income and training cost combo isn't horrible when you've got the bonus tree of gold. Also, it does not apply to thieves, so your thieves are still 500 gold, and that's a decent chunk of your training costs. And yeah, it's a mystic. It does mystic things. I would say that the relative strength of your fairy halfling is higher than your elf mystic last age or your fairy elf this age. So be a little bit wary. And then to the most fun pick of the whole age, and I wish that everyone was playing one and we could just have 2,200 fairy for each other. What do you think, guys? 400% guilds.
I mean,
I think 400% guilds makes your rogue, your halfling, anything significantly weaker than I think anybody is going to predict.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. It was.
I don't know about that. I'd say mystics already in ages past get as high as WPA as they wanted. So
Yes,
having more guilds
but
just means they get it faster.
well, having more guilds means that attacking wizards does not actually do anything. If you have 4 halfling rogues or halfling fairies in a kingdom, and the enemy has 4 fairies, and you really want to, I want to attack wizards so that I can fireball people and take them down. By the time you're done with one fairy, and you've moved on to that last fairy, you're going to have to start with that first fairy again. And it's going to be we just are constantly attacking wizard and going through. And I think that's going to end up being a huge cycle that just you can't get out from.
So can an unbreakable fairy only do Landlust and just run 30% guilds and just eventually win?
That's what my
Well,
thought was.
If
that's
you can
like
carry, if
it
you
could
can
just
carry,
go forever. I don't know if it ever has to stop, right?
I mean, if you can't land meteor showers on it ever, I mean, I remember an age where Simeons built a 30,000 acre ferry in war, but with landlust. It's like if you can keep your WPA up and no one can op you down, and you can't make the enemy lose net worth anywhere else. It's a reasonable thought that they might be able to do that.
Yep, that was my first thought. As soon as I saw, the power that they had was, this is just, this can just think dice out of control. It could land us out of control. This is a perfect growth province.
It's not 716, it's 715. So that science bonus is insane. It's significantly stronger than I would say a human science bonus for what it's trying to accomplish. It might only be relatively like 10% stronger in arcane than the human, but the fairy only needs a bit of DME, maybe some slay science. But you're looking at what, plus 56% effect on your arcane science. This is going to be your heretic in that you can push a lot of cunning. This, it can do a bit of a spread eagle. It can be defensive and cunning. It can have crime and channeling. But I think a fairy that wants to can have significantly higher WPA than any fairy elf. It can have even significantly higher TPA than a fairy halfling if it wants to. So I see it sort of as a anti-TM if it guns in one category, or as sort of that heretic plus damage bonus sort of guy. Also, again, yeah, you can absolutely grow your wizards in war. You can grow in war and keep up your wizard production. It's going to be scary, that's for sure.
That's the beauty of this utility of this province. You can switch up its tasks almost in between wars to some extent. Wizard's per acre obviously isn't as easy to achieve as Thieves per acre, but again, you get the idea. There's a lot of flexibility here, and heretics have always been, historically very deadly provinces as well.
Then again, if you take ops via thievery or magic and you aren't safe to begin with, you're just going to get torn apart and you're just going to spiral out of control. This is, again, a province that it's very, very easy to be like, oh, look, I can run any WPA I want. I'll run 9. Okay, now you ran 100 DPA and you just got torn apart by attackers. So you're very, very going to have to be careful on how you balance offense,
some
defense,
truth to that.
Magic, thievery.
You do have that highest defense elite. I think a fairy, if it wanted to, could go, 2 TPA with 30% watchtowers, built-in IS that they can't MV, and go 10, 11, 12 WPA. You're using the same amount of pop space as any, mystic or rogue does when you combine the two. And if you go all in on the channeling, you've got Mage's Fury versus Mage's Fury. You're looking at situations where you could have double the MWPA or more of a 7 WPA elf. And I mean, that can win you wars when you're looking at those few TMs being cows. I see it as a province that you're either doing really strong fireballs and night strikes, or you're, amnesiaing their TMs and fireballing their mystics, or maybe less reasonably, but even possibly night striking enemy like halflings. I don't see why it couldn't do that if it wanted to do that.
Yeah, and again, I'm kind of surprised that this isn't the #1 TM pick on the server. I do understand Halfer, Faye, but I was expecting.
I think it's just the fact that that those other picks are still half fairy.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, absolutely.
Fairy still picks up 80% of the TM races, but the pure fairy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and still the numbers are pretty close together. I mean, look at the spread, 180, 140, 120. I mean, it's not really that much.
Yeah. And I mean, all three of them are pretty good at being wizards and pretty good at being thieves. So I think there's a lot more overlap than there might otherwise be.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly makes the game feel like it's easier to play in a sense.
Do you think there was pure TM picks that didn't have a fairy, or was there only sort of these hybridy niche non-fairy picks?
I think halfling.
By pure, I basically mean it has to be unbreakable pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I was gonna say I think both halfling gnome and halfling were viable thief mages. You just have to make sure to size them top of your kingdom unbreakable, and then you are the guy who deals with people as they grow.
It's a lot of gold without Tree of Gold. It's a lot of science you don't have, both in bonuses and rev and Fountain of Knowledge. It's
I think
I
it's
mean,
just,
if you can climb that hill,
yeah,
you're king of the castle.
now
And I
that
mean, that's been true for, I like to say this about dark elves in a lot of previous ages, and that
absolutely,
if it
absolutely,
gets there, you're happy,
yeah,
but
totally.
it's a hell of a road.
And that I think, would require some coordination on your kingdom's part. Now, that would have to be a kingdom-wide effort to grow that one or two provinces to the top of the kingdom and keep them there. Let's say starting beginning of age, those would be your cows that you would pump right away.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
living without that guild bonus is it's a lot of pump time. So one pick that I thought was a kind of fun TM that had was going to do a lot better at growing and being that still unbreakable high wizard hard to eco control province was the fairy gnome. That's something I really wanted to see or experiment with, and there's almost none of them. I think there's like 18 of them out there.
Yeah, let me check the most
uh,
recent survey while we're going here. Fairy gnome. There is. Oh, that can't be right. Gnome,
there's
fairy,
5 of them. It's
five
even
of them.
worse than I thought.
Yeah, five. So,
5 fairy gnomes.
so I
You've
saw it
got the same NS power as a halfling fairy.
again. I think gnome was
Yeah,
heavily underpicked. What do we got?
it's
We got
got the
41
same
gnome.
it's got the same night strike output as a fairy halfling. You lose out on that prop in AW, but I
Yeah,
think they're significantly less used than night strike.
yeah. Wow, there are so
You've
few
got you've
gnomes.
got the free attack speed. You've got a little bit of extra offense on those elites, and as you grow, you can freely add either a lot of O specs to keep growing and keep that defense growing, or you can just throw it into thieves and maintain. But yeah, seeing only 5 of those, really surprising. I thought it was almost on par with a fairy halfling with a little less, roguey feelings and a little bit more hybrid mystic feels. So,
I think this is just
I,
where it
I
comes.
feel bad I didn't pick one myself,
I think
but
this is where it just comes down
what are you
to,
going to do?
the comfortability, all the players in the world, and then, the influence of the
Yeah.
community. A lot of people were saying Gnome and Dark Elf were probably the worst picks. And I mean, it shows in the numbers, they're pretty close together in terms of how few of them there are. Um, you know, as I said, it would have been nice to see some more gnomes. Awesome. So are there any other combinations you guys want to talk
Yeah.
about?
Nothing specific. I mean, there's certainly more interesting combos out there, but you're getting into niche territory there. So
Yeah, and I think it comes down
I'd
to,
say overall, I'm surprised with the amount of peers in the attackers. I
mhm,
thought there would be almost none.
right.
So I thought that Dryad would actually be one of the more picked peers. I also thought Dwarf would be way more picked than it is. There's only 30
Mm-hmm.
Dwarf out there.
Yeah, that's kind of
Blew me away.
surprising. That's kind of surprising. Because it is such a strong pick as well. I think people just saw the low offensive numbers and just thought, how am I supposed to make that an attacker?
I think maybe if it kept the like +1 defense, you might have seen pure Dwarf go from 30 to 100. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
people that wanted that play style decided all to go human. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's why there's so many of them, I think. That and I think, a lot of avians were picked as well. So definitely a lot of people are favoring avian. And I think,
I mean, Dwarf. I was just gonna say, well, Dwarf, even at that, without that +1, was still picked more than Avian. So,
uh,
it's not that surprising. There were 455 picks of Dwarf, 420 picks of Avian.
still pretty
yeah,
close,
it's
pretty
just
close
that
numbers.
everyone's going hybrid Dwarf. And again, that makes sense. I
Mm-hmm.
said it before. Hybrid Dwarf is amazing. So
Yeah,
it's very spread out, right? You've
absolutely.
got,
Absolutely.
80 or 70 or so dwarf undead, you've got like 60 dwarf orc, you've got like 60 dwarf human, and then you've got like 150 dwarf dryad, another 60 dwarf avian. So I think dwarf's one of the most it can do anything picks, sort of in a way that I thought fairy would be. I thought I might actually see more fairy sort of attacker combos, but
Me
I don't
too.
think many of those panned out. You've got
Too.
20, 40, some amount of fairy dryads. Yeah, it's about 29.
Yeah,
So,
very
Would have been
fair.
a fun setup. Just
but I don't think you can really beat 50% birth rate and reflect magic. So I think those 400 dwarves are going to have a time of their lives this age.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always have a good time when I'm playing dwarf.
Well, that was
So
fun.